Welcome back to the morning session of the international conference, of today's international conference. We have our first session to begin, and it would be the rector's session, Women in University Leadership and the Future of Higher Education. This session would be moderated by Dr. Nazah Ashri, who is the Vice President and Senior Associate to the President of the King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, and also works for the Strategic National Advancement in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We would like to welcome her on the stage, and Dr. Nazah is also a computer scientist by education, and her work experience has huge reflections on strategic planning, development, and implementation. And she is also the founding member of the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. Can we please put our hands together to welcome our moderator of this session, Dr. Nazah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته ويوم ميمون وجمع مبارك بعون الله تعالى. What a great start for the day. We heard from magnificent speaker this morning. We'll try to keep our panel discussion flowing, to keep it short, crisp, and fresh. I'll start by a few words about the topic of our panel, which is Women in University Leadership and the Future of Higher Education. The 21st century has witnessed significant global changes in economics, political, and social structures. A fundamental shift has been women's growing involvement and contribution to every sector, but specifically to higher education. In most contexts worldwide, women today are enrolling in higher education at similar or even higher rates to men. We've heard statistics all morning, and all of the statistics that were shared prove this fact. However, these statistics give the false impression that gender equality in higher education has been achieved. We can be very optimistic. However, we do still have some challenges. Higher education remains highly unequal in gender in almost every part of the world. This is particularly pronounced in higher education leadership, with the vast majority of senior leadership positions still held by men. For example, in a recent study by Times Higher Education World University Ranking, the study revealed that just 43 of the top 200 universities are currently led by women. Understanding the value of gender inclusivity in higher education setting is both timely and critical, as is understanding the key challenges preventing women from contributing to higher education around the globe. In these uncertain times, universities have goals toward increased effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, and overall organizational performance and impact. Additionally, the future of higher education is underpinned by technological changes and internationalization that require diverse perspectives, innovative solutions, as well as the transformation of the traditional male-dominated leadership culture. We now have an opportunity. We have a great opportunity to champion the future of education through inclusive and transformational leadership that inspires change and new age thinking and catalyzes the innovation and growth through collaboration. It gives me great honor to welcome our panel to the stage. I'll call them by name, who will be discussing different perspectives of this topic. Dr. Brett Royce-Ellis, please. Dr. Yusra Al-Jazairi. Dr. Bushra Mirza. Dr. Pamela Norris. Thank you. I'll introduce the first speaker. Please have a seat. I will introduce the first speaker. Dr. Brett Royce-Ellis serves as Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost of Auckland University. Her focus is student success, equity, and ensuring fertile ground for research, access to high-impact practices, and community engagement. She is the recipient of the Henry Montes Presidential Award from the American Public Health Association's Latino Caucus, 2 Women of the Year accolades, and the Soul Award from LA County Office of AIDS Policy. She was a commissioned member of the CDC's Advisory Committee on HIV, Hepatitis, and STD Prevention and Treatment to President Obama's Advisory Commission from HIV Disclosure Work Group. Her topic today is answering the call to support women advancement in higher education and the professional workforce.
Thank you so very much for the honor of being with you today. I would like to begin by thanking Eisesco, Princess Nora bint Abdulrahman University, and a very special golden grizzly. I don't want you to be afraid that there are bears in the audience, but our motto is the Golden Grizzlies, and we have a very special one today, Dr. Abdul Rahman, who has made our participation possible. So thank you so much. I want to, my PowerPoint. There we go. I want to start by telling you that I am a mother of 3 wonderful human beings, a wife of a very evolved and beautiful man, and the executive vice president for academic affairs and provost of a university led by a great woman leader, Dr. Ora Hirsch-Peskovitz. I also have the honor of serving you today with a great partner for international education, Dr. Rosemary Max. Without doubt, the most exploited resource in any society, I'm just going to put them all up at once, is the diversity of which it is comprised. In terms of the Middle East and North Africa, much of the diverse resources that remained unrecognized is that of women and minority full participation in societal well-being and prosperity. The need for gender equity in higher education has never been more essential. Despite the great strides for parity following the infrastructure growth to support females in higher education, women's participation in the workforce remains stagnated in certain parts of the Middle East and North Africa, or MENA. Although the number of female university students in Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Jordan, and Oman is equal or now exceeds that of their male counterparts, in other parts of MENA, girls lack access to education and comprise the majority of out-of-school children. These circumstances, wherein gender imbalance blatantly exists, propagate societal norms that warrant immediate elimination. Lack of access to education has been attributed to poor funding, corruption, discrimination, nationalism, and regional characteristics wherein large MENA countries with diverse regions experience disparate educational access, depending on economic access, industry, and religion. Even when women possess college degrees, the enforcement of traditional patriarchal gender roles relegates women exclusively to the duties of childcare and what I refer to as home engineering, leaving societies without their vast skills and contributions. Being a mom myself, I know is much like being an engineer, because I can tell you that the amount of information that a mother must remember and the detail of that information warrants much greater societal recognition. Despite the fact that research has demonstrated that diverse teams are more innovative and Western industry continues to clamor for diversity hires, employers in some regions of MENA have failed to catalyze this inherent diversity, leaving women's participation in decision-making and agency the greatest neglected resource of many countries. Disability status renders additional neglect of human potential, between 63% and 92% of females with disabilities in specific regions in MENA report having no schooling whatsoever. Social determinants such as access to education, training, and technology, migration, race and ethnicity, language, and healthcare render females further marginalized. For meaningful change to occur, men must align with women to advance policy and infrastructure with the ultimate goal of enhancing women's rights through improved education and workforce pipelines. Women's agency should no longer be feared. According to the Sustainable Development Goals report in 2022, it will take another 40 years for women and men to be represented equally within national political leadership. And humanity simply does not have that long to wait. If someone were to ask me what made a difference in my life's success, I'm going to put these all up. It would most definitely be that I was blessed with a father who, although not rich in material wealth, provided me with the unconditional love and encouragement to believe in my capacities as a scholar, a mother, and the creator of my life and the facilitator of my family's potential. My father always told me to follow my heart and my passion for helping others, and that material resources would follow good work. He taught me to value the human potential of the potential of human spirit beyond all else, and to lend a helping hand at all times. I often fear that these basic values are sometimes forgotten as we value that which shines above that which resonates within our souls. I want to implore all of you to work collectively, as did my father, to mitigate the gender imbalance we see in education. This is not a problem of women or men, but rather that of humanity. As Ziauddin Yousafzai stated, why would we want nations to walk on one leg by educating only half of the population? I, like Malala, continue to be greatly motivated by my father's spirit. Unfortunately, my father passed away on September 22nd this year, just 2 weeks before my 60th birthday. My father has been described by many relatives in my family as women's greatest advocate, the greatest advocate they'd ever met. When I entered college in my 80s, many of my female counterparts were still pursuing what they called their MRS degrees. I wondered what that was when I first heard it, and it really was the degree of Mrs. They were searching for husbands while at school. I was shocked when I first learned of this practice, for my father never taught me to need a man, but rather to educate myself first and foremost, to be a good partner someday to a man. I miss him greatly, but his spirit and legacy will forever shine within me. He also shows up every once in a while. Less than a month ago, and less than 2 months after his passing, Dr. Rosemary Max and I were traveling throughout Mexico, engaging in educational connections. My husband, who is Mexican, was very worried about Rosemary and I renting a car and driving throughout Mexico City. I assured him that we would be just fine. When the staff in the car rental facility showed up with the car, I knew that he was still very much by my side and that we would be just fine. I want to show you the license plate of the car. It says Dad. And furthermore, my father was born in August of 1935. He was with me. Thank you. And we were safe. I want to say that Rosemary is an excellent driver. I didn't drive, but she did. We've had an excellent time. I ask that all of you in the room expect the best from each other, regardless of your gender. And I ask all of the young men in the room to always be the best fathers by encouraging your daughters to achieve all that they possibly can. I also ask you all to encourage women's leadership and avoid the stereotypes that have women competing with one another. We are all facing planetary challenges that require us all to be educated and participating fully in the betterment of our respective societies and the planet overall. Shukran. Thank you.
What a great message. What a great story. Thank you for sharing. It's definitely an inspiration. Our next speaker is Dr. Yusra bint Hussein al-Jazairi. Dr. Yusra is a great champion of higher education, and she has served on multiple positions and posts to support the empowerment of women in higher education. She's a dentist by training. However, she has held many posts, including covering one of the first few women assigned to the post of the cultural attaché, and it happens to be here in Morocco. She also has won some really interesting prizes. I understand from reading about her that she is one of the greatest mentors, and she's known to support students. And one of the good prizes, one of the interesting prizes I want to highlight is a prize that she won by students voting for the best teacher, the best mentor, and she won that prize while teaching in King Saud University. We have a slight change of our agenda for this morning, and she graciously agreed to be part of this panel, so I ask her to come to the stage and share her thoughts on the topic.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السادة والسيدات، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. شرف كبير أحظى به اليوم لأشارك كل المتألقات التي تلمع أسماؤهن في أجندة هذا المؤتمر الهام. واسمحوا لي أن تكون مداخلتي ليست أكاديمية، قضت الكثير من سنوات حياتها في محراب الجامعات، وليست كمهنية توشحت بلباسها الأبيض منذ نعومة أظافرها وهي تتنقل بين طرقات المستشفيات بهدف زرع الابتسامة على شفاه مرضاها، بالرغم من فخري الشديد بتلك الأدوار. ولأن موضوع اليوم يتعلق في نهاية الأمر بالمرأة، ولذلك سأقدم كلمتي كأم وامرأة عربية ومسلمة تنقلت في ربوع عالمنا الإسلامي شرقاً وغرباً، ولأني كأي أم يظل ذهنها دائماً مشتبك مع الأحداث، يحاول أن ينسج لأولادها وأحفادها مستقبلاً أكثر توازناً وأكثر سعادة وأكثر أمناً. فحديثنا اليوم هو التوازن بين الجنسين في ظل التنمية المجتمعية. فتمكين المرأة هي القضية التي لم يبقى كيان شرقاً ولا غرباً إلا أعلن تصديه لنصرتها، وهي تستحق تلك النصرة. وأريد أن أشارككم اليوم من خلال هذا المنبر وجهة نظر أطرحها للمناقشة، نتفق أو نختلف عليها ليس هو المهم، لأن الأهم هو أن نستشرف من خلال مناقشتنا للبيانات المطروحة بين يدينا اليوم والسيناريوهات الممكن حدوثها في المستقبل، وأن ننتبه جيداً لمردود كافة المؤشرات التي تحيط بنا اليوم في وقت شديد التعقيد وسريع التغير. بالتأكيد لا يسعني إلا أن أتفق عن عدم الرضا العام على الكثير من المؤشرات الخاصة بوضع المرأة، ولكن عالمياً وليس فقط في منطقتنا العربية والإسلامية. فنسبة النساء اللواتي يشغلن منصب كبار المسؤولين في بلاد العالم الإسلامي بلغت حتى 2019 نسبة 12% مقابل 18% بالمتوسط العالمي. ولذلك وجب علينا أيضاً أن ندرس تجارب الآخرين بحيادية وشمولية، وخصوصاً أن نتائج المؤشرات الخاصة بالمرأة في العالم الإسلامي تكاد تكون متقاربة في كثير من الأحيان مع المؤشرات العالمية. فالمحك لديهم ليس النتائج فقط، وإنما أيضاً ما حدث خلال رحلة الغرب للوصول لتلك النتائج، والتي دائماً ما يتحدث الجميع عنها عن طول مدتها ومشقة معاركها. فلا يسعنا أن ندرس المؤشرات الخاصة بالمرأة بمعزل عن المؤشرات الخاصة باستقرار المجتمع، مثل الضمان الاجتماعي، نسبة استقرار الأسر، نسبة كبار السن بلا عائل، نسبة الطلاق، والعديد من المؤشرات الأخرى. ولن نحتاج الكثير من التحليل لقراءة المعطيات التي توضح أن الشعارات التي وسمت معركة تمكين المرأة في النموذج الغربي لم يقدم طفرات حقيقية في نتائج المؤشرات الخاصة بالمرأة لديهم، ولكن للأسف له من الآثار الجانبية شديدة التأثير، مما أضر بثوابت المجتمع لديهم وأضر باستدامة التنمية فيه على المدى الطويل. فعزوف الشباب في الغرب عن تكوين أسر وعن الإنجاب أضر بالتركيبة السكانية في تلك المجتمعات وأثقل كاهلها الاقتصاد، وأصبحت مجتمعات يتم تصنيفها بمجتمعات العجائز. ولأن تنمية وتطوير المجتمعات تعتمد على الإنسان كمحور أساسي في تقدمها، وأهم عملية استثمارية تقوم بها أي دولة نامية هو تنمية أفراد مجتمعها كممكن أساسي لبرامجها التطويرية اقتصادياً أو اجتماعياً. وعليه فإن دور المرأة في تكوين وتشكيل شخصيات أطفالها الذين يشكلون آمال الأمة مستقبلاً هو أساس التنمية في أي مجتمع. وبالتالي فإن دور المرأة التنموي في المجتمع لا يقتصر فقط على ما تساهم فيه في بيئة العمل، ولا يجب أن يغفل، بل أقولها بكل حيادية، يجب أن يؤخذ في المقام الأول مساهماتها الأسرية، والتي تؤدي إلى إحداث تغيير اجتماعي عميق التأثير، والذي يسهم بشكل مباشر في تحقيق تقدم المجتمع بشكل متوازن وشمولي. ولذلك وجدنا الكثير من الدول الغربية بدأت الآن تتبنى استراتيجيات مندمجة لتمكين المرأة في ظل تنمية المجتمع، مثل تقليل أيام العمل لتصبح 4 بدل أو عوضاً عن 5 أيام، وتقليل ساعات العمل في المؤسسات ليبدأ بشكل مرن من الساعة 10 حتى يتمكن الآباء والأمهات من اصطحاب أطفالهم للمدرسة وقضاء أوقات خاصة مثمرة مع أولادهم، مما له كبير الأثر على تحسين شعورهم بالأمن والأمان. ولا يسعني إلا أن أثمن بعض التجارب الاستثنائية شديدة الوعي التي تبنتها دول العالم الإسلامي وقيادتها، والتي أدركت منذ تبني ملفات التمكين لديها بأهمية الحفاظ على ثوابت ومكتسبات استقرار التوازن للمجتمع، مثل ضرورة توفير حاضنات للنساء العاملات في المؤسسات الحكومية والخاصة، تقديم مزايا إجازات لرعاية الأطفال، والعمل المرن والعمل من المنزل. أشعر ولله الحمد بالاطمئنان الكبير عندما أرى قطاعات الأعمال في المملكة العربية السعودية تتبنى رؤية القيادة، بل تتنافس في تقديم خدمات استباقية ومبتكرة لتحسين بيئة العمل للنساء والرجال على حد سواء، ليس فقط لرفع إنتاجيتهم في بيئة العمل، وإنما لإعانتهم على أداء دورهم الاجتماعي بشكل متوازن وداعم للتنمية المجتمع. وهذا الحدث الهام اليوم ما هو إلا تجسيد لهذا الوعي والرؤية لمؤسسة تعليمية كبرى تعنى بتأهيل المرأة، ومنظمة الإيسيسكو التي اتخذت من نفسها منارة لتوعي وتعزز هذا الوعي بشكل عملي داخل مؤسسات العالم الإسلامي. وفي نهاية مداخلتي أهيب بقيادات النسائية في التعليم العالي المجتمعة اليوم والمتابعة لهذا الحدث الهام أن نرتكز بثبات على الممارسات السباقة التي تمت في دولنا، والرؤية الواعية التي تعاملت مع قضايا المرأة بتوازن، وليست بمعزل عن النظرة الشمولية لتطوير المجتمع. ولا يسعني أن أختم مداخلتي دون شكر صديقة أعتبرها قيادية، نسائية، أكاديمية، عربية، إسلامية، واعية وبارعة، أدركت أن تمكين المرأة لن يتم فقط داخل قاعات الدراسة في الحرم الجامعي، وإنما سيتم من خلال خلق شراكات استراتيجية قادرة على خلق ثقافة مجتمعية قادرة على تطوير المجتمع مع الاحتفاظ على ثوابته. شكراً دكتورة إيناس بنت سليمان العيسى رئيسة جامعة الأميرة نورة بنت عبد الرحمن، وشكراً لكم على حسن استماعكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Dr. Yusra, for a very interesting viewpoint, food for thought. Dr. Yusra has to leave us for an emergency meeting as well, so we thank her again, if you don't mind. Our next speaker is Dr. Bushra, Professor Dr. Bushra Mirza. She's the Vice Chancellor of Lahore College Women University, which is one of the largest women universities in Asia. She has published more than 200 papers in leading international journals and has been awarded an honorary position of Eisesco Women's Science Chair, and has been actively engaged in the promotion of female scientists working in organizations of the Islamic cooperation countries. She's a member of several international forums like UNESCO IFAB, National Committee, Global Biodiversity and Health Big Data Alliance, and executive member of the national chapter of the Organization of Women Scientists of Developing World, and recipient of several awards, including Best Young Research Scholar, awarded by Higher Education Commission of Pakistan, and a gold medal by Pakistan Academy of Sciences. Her talk is entitled Women in University Leadership and the Future of Higher Education.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you very much, Eisesco leadership, their whole team, as well as Nora bint Abdurrahman University for organizing this event. It's such an honor for me to be here to speak to all of you at this special occasion. I think Morocco is the right place to organize this event because this is the country where first women university was established by a women leader. And that reminds me the lead role of Morocco for the purpose of women in higher education. First of all, let me introduce myself. I head Lahore College for Women University, which was established in 1922 as an intermediate college, so it has completed its 100th year this year. And during this completion of 100th year, it has produced thousands and thousands of students who are contributing in Pakistan as well as abroad in almost every sphere of life. And we have the highest number of students as well as the highest number of degree program. We are going to complete our century in degree programs also this year by starting law. But before that, we have all these sorts of diverse programs like engineering and arts and social sciences and pharmacy and so on. I personally feel that women in higher education are performing far better than before, and I see a very bright prospect in future because as our honorable speaker in the beginning mentioned that higher education, Times Higher Education has mentioned there are 40 universities, around 40 universities which are headed by women in the top 200 universities of the world. I look at it in a positive perspective because I have seen the data in the last 20 years. And in 2001, if you compared with 2020 data, 2021 data, which she shared in a few minutes ago, in 2001, there were less than half of the number. In fact, there were just 15 universities which were headed by women, and now it's almost more than 40. So I see it's a positive thing, and that is, inshallah, going to increase, and it is going to have a very positive impact in higher education overall. I see the same situation in Pakistan also, whether it is the vice chancellors who are heading the institutions, and also the women who are performing as scientists. As it has been mentioned earlier, I was awarded Icisco Women Science Chair a few years back, and I did some work in that regard and realized that what are the things which are keeping women behind and not performing as well as men, especially reaching to the higher position. Because we do see a lot of women in Pakistan as well as in other countries that they perform well at lower positions. Like, for example, as undergraduates, we find lots of female, but reaching to the PhD position, the number decreases. Same applies to when they join the jobs. At lecturer position, we see lots of women, but as they move to the professor position, we find very few. And one of the factors which we noticed was that they are not good at making networking. You know, they need to develop collaborations, and that actually is the key to success in today's world. So we have been trying in Lahore College for Women University to establish more collaboration, and that is why we have worldwide collaborations with many universities, leading universities of the world. And that was the reason this year Lahore College for Women University became the first women university who was ranked in Times World Higher Education University ranking, which is an honor for us as well as for my country. I personally feel that women can perform better as they have been doing, and they can perform even better in future. I can share some statistics with you. This year in science, Stanford University released a list of the scientists, which were 2% most cited scientists of the world. And in Pakistan, because I keep on monitoring the data of Pakistan Council of Science and Technology and other forums, and in Pakistan, there was 144 people who were part of that 2% most cited scientists of the world. And among those 144, there were like 15 women. And you know, we can look at the half glass full or half glass empty, even though this makes just 10% of the total scientists, but we need to acknowledge the effort of those women that in spite of our difficulties, they did manage to become the 2% most cited scientists of the world. So I think that is what we need to do. We need to acknowledge the contribution of women and look at the positive side. And at the same time, we need to acknowledge the contribution of men also, who have helped us to reach to the position where we are. Because I think most of the time, problem is that men feel insecure. They do not really need to feel insecure by the achievements of women, because when a woman achieves, it's not just achievement for herself, but it's achievement of the family, it's achievement of the society, and of course, it's the achievement of this whole world. And that is why in my country, we are working on how we can empower more women, how we can bring more women in higher education. Recently, there was a consortium established which was supposed to provide some recommendations how more women can come in higher education. I had that consortium, and we realized that there are certain laws which have been passed in Pakistan. There is one law, Women Empowerment Act in 2014, which actually asks you to ensure at least 33% women presence in any higher committee or board or commission, but it's not being implemented. So now we are trying our best to ensure that these laws which have been approved should be at least implemented. And then, of course, we need to make more laws to ensure that more women come in power. I think we need to do such things. For example, when I was working on this Icisco Women Science Chair, I came to know that there is a program called Athena's One program in UK, which actually rates every institution which has worked in terms of reducing the gender gap and for inclusiveness. And they award some sort of medals, gold, silver, or bronze, on terms of the institutions who have been able to reduce the gender gap and for their inclusive policies. I think that sort of programs need to be implemented in every country to ensure that every year institutions make their progress to include more women in the mainstream. And similarly, there are several other initiatives which can be taken, and institutions can be ensured to make women participate at higher education and bring them to the higher positions, because that is the key. When we have women in the higher position, at the policy-making position, only then we can ensure that more women will be coming to the top. But at the same time, as I said, we need to acknowledge men also for their contribution. And that is why this year, when we were organizing, celebrating our Women's Day, we actually invited those men who contributed to the success of the women, because I think that is something which really needs to be acknowledged. And that is going to ensure progress of men and women both as a society. As previously, one speaker mentioned the story of the contribution of her father, I also personally feel that the position to which I have reached is because of 6 men in my life. It was my father whose support, it was the guidance of my brother, it's the cooperation of my husband, and it's the lovely company of my 3 boys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza. Our next speaker is Dr. Pamela Norris. Dr. Pamela Norris is the Vice Provost for Research at George Washington University. She previously served in roles as the Executive Dean, the Executive Associate Dean of Research, and the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies in the University of Virginia, School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, as well as the Frederick Tracy Morse Professor Emerita of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. She is well known for her mentoring skills and for her dedication to increasing diversity in the STEM disciplines. In 2016, she was honored with the Society of Women Engineers Distinguished Engineering Educator Award for enduring positive influence on students' lives as a gifted teacher, mentor, and role model, and for promoting greater diversity in STEM higher education. Recently, she has been elected an honorary member of ASME for international leadership in nano, micro, and macro scale thermal sciences and engineering research, but more importantly, for tireless efforts to advance diversity in STEM fields, and for demonstrating engineering excellence as an outstanding mentor for students and faculty. Her topic is Pathways to Academic Leadership. Help me welcome her, please.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the kind invitation and the ability to join this really important conversation, a topic I'm quite passionate about. I believe in the power of stories, so I'm going to tell some stories today. So in 2016, I was the very proud recipient of an award given at the University of Virginia by the Women's Center. It celebrates leadership that is found in many areas and positions at the university. The day the award was publicized, social media, newspapers, lots of releases, and I received hundreds of emails from lots of people, friends, colleagues, trustees, administrators, former students, but there was one email that really stood out. It was from a former minority undergraduate advisee from my very early years as an assistant professor. Sam currently lives in Manila, where he is in charge of protecting national security for U.S. embassies and consulates in Asia. He wrote me a very thoughtful and rather long message, which began, "I'm sure you do not remember me by now, but you were my undergraduate advisor from 1996 to 2001. You helped me through a tough time at UVA. You were part of my core support system, even though you never knew it. It is an absolute truth that I would not have made it to graduation without you." After giving details of his life since UVA, he went on to say, "Since this award recognizes your career in academic and research leadership, I wanted you to know how much your leadership has been in my life. I would not be here today without your patience, perseverance, and compassion." He ended by saying, "Please keep doing the great work you do to prepare generations of engineers. Remember, we may not all look the part at one point or another, but your influence is endearing." Sam's letter really reminded me of a few important lessons. First, the importance of perseverance. which was a trait Sam himself displayed very well. Second, the observation that we may not all look the part. Boy, is that true. As a female mechanical engineer, where only 14% of the workforce still in the United States is female, I'm acutely aware of this. Finally, how often is it that people unknowingly can have a significant impact on others with their words and actions? Often we don't even realize how profoundly we affect others, nor do we stop to think of the profound effects others have had on our lives. Sam's letter reminded me to stop and reflect on the many people that opened doors along my pathway to academic leadership. So who am I? I grew up in a home with my grandparents and a single mom who was a secretary. We lived in a military town with all of my family working at the shipyards and naval bases. I decided I wanted to be an engineer in 4th grade when I went to a learning lab sponsored by NASA, which introduced kids to engineering. I came home and said, "Mom, I want to be an engineer when I grow up." She had no idea that was a rather strange thing for a little girl to be saying, thank goodness, because she didn't know what an engineer was. So, sure, honey, you can be anything you want to be. And luckily, that stuck. But, of course, the desire to do that and the ability to demonstrate my abilities to go to college in that area was still required many interventions along the way. So my high school math teacher really took me aside and saw my gift for mathematics, and she encouraged me to register in a state math competition. And after winning 2nd place in that competition, I began to have the confidence, indeed, I can go to college and I can study engineering. But I needed to stay home because I couldn't afford college, so I went to the local university, Old Dominion University, where my department chairman, again, saw an ability, and he really mentored me along the way. He enabled me to have leadership roles on design projects. Actually, my undergraduate capstone design project was to design the oxygen processor for Mars, and the mission to Mars that just landed was based on the design of our oxygen processor. How cool is that? He's the one that, yeah, thank you. He's the one, I had always wanted to be a teacher. I assumed that would be like a middle school math teacher, right? He's the one that suggested, you might want to go to graduate school, and you could be a university professor, maybe at a community college. That never occurred to me, but he had to educate me about the fact that in the US, at least in engineering, they pay you to go to graduate school. It's like, oh, I can do that. So I was recruited to Georgia Tech, where once again I had the fortune of being recruited by a person who has won many national awards in the US for mentorship of women in mechanical engineering. So he became my faculty advisor. Actually, my first advisor was the very first woman to ever get a PhD in mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech. She left after a year, and then Dr. Wepfer, who had recruited me, he became my PhD advisor, and I became only the 3rd woman ever to get a PhD in mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech, because he convinced me, no, not a community college, maybe a university. Okay, so I'll graduate and maybe teach at a small university. Then I had the great fortune of meeting the Chancellor of Berkeley, Chamberlain Tien, and he convinced me to come do a postdoc with him at Berkeley. Okay, maybe I'll teach at a research institution. So each time these people gave me an idea and expressed confidence in my abilities, and thus enabled me to dream bigger and go bigger. And that led to my postdoc at Berkeley, where I totally switched my research from heat transfer and diesel engine cylinder heads, a pretty traditional mechanical engineering field, to nanoscale heat transfer, where Dr. Tien was the father of the field. That was a pretty bold move. It took a lot of confidence. I assure you that little girl from Portsmouth, Virginia would not have made that choice had it not been for all these people that had mentored me along the way. The field of nanoscale heat transfer was founded by Chancellor Tien, my postdoc advisor, And pretty much everyone in the field can trace the origins back to him. This is important because he really instilled a culture of mentorship. It's not a super competitive field. It's a field where we all believe we succeed as a whole if we help and support each other. So the many peers in the field have been my academic family, and that's largely due to Tien's leadership. See, he really believed in the value of excellence through diversity. In fact, I met him at a seminar by that title. And to show you how dedicated he was to this, at the end of his career, he only had women work in his mechanical engineering lab. So there were 5 of us at the time. So that is really showing his demonstration to the values of excellence through diversity. One of them's now a member of the National Academy. One of them's a vice provost for research. Another's a senior director at Sandia National Lab. So he did a great job of mentoring us. So with all of these people helping to pave my pathway and open doors along the way, who am I now? Well, I was the first woman to rise through the ranks from assistant to associate to full to chaired professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, winner of the SAE Distinguished Educator Award, only because I had a strong advocate, Jill Tejan, who makes it her passion in life to nominate women for awards that they're so deserving of, but no one takes the time to mentor them and to nominate them for it. I'm a dedicated mentor. She also nominated me for the distinguished or honorary member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. I hold patents now for jet blast deflectors on aircraft carriers. That little girl that came from the military town with all my family working at the shipyards, I own the patent for the landing pads for the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that are going to be on the next generation aircraft carriers. That's engineering with impact. Thank you. That's what happens when you release the potential of the other half of the population. So after serving as the executive dean of the engineering school at UVA, I'm now the vice provost for research at GW, but I'm also a mother, a wife, and a daughter. Having my kids, I have modeled the importance of being a full-time mother while also being a full-time academic. With my husband, I've modeled the role of having a true partnership in marriage. Despite the fact that my husband was a stay-at-home dad and I could have chosen to go back to work right after my kids were born, like many academics do, I realized the importance of taking the leave that was offered to me. I took the full semester. I stayed home. I did my research, but I did not teach. I did not contribute to service activities. So really modeling the behavior so that the women coming after me would have an easier time at it. So many doors were open for me. And then in my path to university leadership, the president at the time when I came in, he appointed me to chair the Women's Leadership Council for the university, which really gave me a wide view of the university. And it also gave me a relationship with the then provost, Jean Block, who recruited me to attend the HERS Institute in 2007, a long time ago. The HERS Institute is an organization which is aimed at really training next generation of university administration. It was a month-long residential program. He paid my salary for that month, and he paid for the full expenses of attendance. This was a clear indication of the university's commitment to developing my leadership potential, because it was long before I took on a leadership role. So these were all important things that happened to enable me to get where I am today. So wishing to enhance that environment for other women in the STEM disciplines at UVA, I began applying for the National Science Foundation Institutional Transformation Grants beginning in 2005. It took 3 tries, 3 attempts, and there's only a call every 3 years, but remember perseverance. So on the 3rd attempt, we were awarded a $3.2 million grant, and it's aimed at enhancing the environment for women STEM faculty. Some of our successes, we developed an exhibit highlighting the success stories, again, this value of storytelling, of the women STEM pioneers at our institution. We changed search committee evaluation criteria, made them use a rubric. We educated them on the role of implicit bias and ways to mitigate that in search processes. For this work, we utilized a theater approach because people are much more likely to sit and watch a performance and think, I've been in that search committee meeting where I've seen how implicit bias has changed the conversation, versus you telling them you have implicit biases that you need to learn to mitigate. So this was found to be a very effective process for us. And we developed an Office of Dual Career Support, which has been really important for the women faculty. So I'll just end by asking each of you, one day when somebody's standing on a stage, what part of the story will you have, what role will you play in the development of the next generation university leadership? Thank you.
Hello? So thank you very much, Pamela. It's very thoughtful remarks. Maybe we can start some dialogue going here. My question that I would like to start with, and I'd like to hear your perspectives, is how would you suggest universities can best ensure a more equitable future for academic women leaders? We all have shared some concerns, and I think we all have some advice, but more importantly, not for individuals, for universities. What can be done? I moved it around so it works. So, yeah, move it around and it picks up.
I think, some of the things that you mentioned about implicit bias, I think those are very central, and really understanding. I think as women, I just want to get some hands maybe if you've experienced this. Maybe you have an idea in a meeting and you're sitting around a meeting with your colleagues. You all have ideas, I hope. Yes, okay, so all the women are raising their hands. But then you express your idea, and then about one or two or three people along the way, someone repeats your idea and then receives the credit for that idea. Has that happened to you? So I think, which women has this not happened to? Maybe I should ask that question. But I think what is really important is attributing to women what they contribute. Because so many times it is the louder voice, and it's the one that we're more used to hearing, that receives the credit for what has been contributed. So I think and this is an example of explicit bias, not just implicit bias, but I think that when we're searching for women's representation, it's not just those who are seeking the credit. Many times my mentors, and I try to mentor as if it is acknowledging those and making sure that people are giving credit. On my team, I want people who don't just seek their own rewards, but share these rewards with others, right? And really contribute a great deal to the conversation. So look for the quiet voices and always acknowledge when they speak.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I mentioned the program that the provost identified me for very early as maybe an associate professor at that time. So what can institutions do? They can begin to grow the pipeline of leadership. I think that's really important. So that's one message. Another message is look at the physical environment and see if it's inviting for all present. For example, the mechanical engineering conference room, where we made all of our hiring decisions, where we quizzed and really decided on the future of all of our PhD students. Would they earn their degree? Would they pass their qualifying exams and be able to stay? That was the conference room that was lined with the photos of all the retired faculty members from my department. Guess what those photos looked like? 40 white men, right? And the woman's supposed to stand into that room feeling like an outsider from the moment they step in and be expected to perform in order to gain the
the recognition that they're probably fully qualified for. So look at the physical environment and try to figure out how that might be impacting the performance of people and the sense of, am I welcomed here? Is this a place where I belong?
Thank you.
I feel that it's very important that we have women at the topmost positions and at the decision-making or policy-making positions, because only women can understand what they have experienced and how they can ensure that this is not experienced by others. So this can be done at every level, and everybody can contribute. That if it's a conference, if it's a committee, if it's a commission, you have to make sure that there is a woman present there. And that ensures that policies are made which can make women comfortable in that environment. And that is what we have been doing. As I just said, that I'm chairing that consortium which is supposed to ensure women empowerment. And in that, we are just pointing out that which committee is formed in which women is not present. And we actually asked everybody to make sure that you refuse to participate in that committee or in that meeting where women is not present. So I think in this way, everybody can contribute, and particularly the leadership.
Indeed. Thank you very much. I have a question. Thank you. That perhaps could be answered differently. So different from different perspectives, but also maybe said differently for different perspectives. So basically, for your experience, Dr. Bushra, is this from your experience, Dr. Bushra, is about stereotypes. How did you manage to change stereotypes associated with women in science and engineering in Pakistan? Again, for our Western panel members, it's about the narrative. How do we change the narrative about women in science and engineering being also having a voice, as you said? Please, Bushra.
Well, I think stereotype will be changed only once we have more and more women in there. And as just it was mentioned, before becoming head of this women university, I was teaching as a professor in a co-ed university in Islamabad. And we professors, female professors, used to discuss sometimes, and we realized that whenever we have a new vice chancellor, and they were always male, and in a meeting, if he wants to get opinion about some issue, and there is a woman who has raised her hand and a man has raised his hand, he would always ask the man first. And later on, after having spent some time in the university, then he would realize that these women also have experience and they can also give some word of wisdom. So they would start asking us also first. So we used to have this kind of joke that every woman in this university is not competent unless she proves herself, and every man is competent till he proves himself otherwise. So that was the situation, So I think you need to be a bit patient, and you need to ensure that you have more and more women who prove themselves, and that is how this whole system is going to change. So, in our university, we are making sure that we have women in almost, going to every field in the higher position level, and that is going to change the scenario.
Thank you.
I should have ended my story by saying once I became a leader, my executive assistant went and took down all 40 of those pictures. They still don't know where they're buried. So anyway, they're gone. But to that point, I think that our male colleagues have an important role to play in helping us to more quickly establish our credentials. Because as you say, we have to prove ourselves first. So my postdoc advisor, Dr. Tien, who was a gifted mentor, one of the things I learned quickly is to follow and watch everything he did, because it was always with a purpose. So when I'd go to a conference with him, he'd want me to walk with him, and he'd introduce me to the most influential people in the room. But when he did it, he would quickly establish my credentials with them. So I automatically started on a different playing field in my conversations with these people. Which was very important. Building on that idea, one of the things I initiated at UVA was a first lecture tradition. That is, when you hire a new faculty member and they go into the classroom for the first time, the students don't know what to think of them. If it's a young woman engineering professor that shows up in front of their class, in fact, especially at UVA, where the tradition is to not use professor or doctor, but Ms. is Mr. Jefferson believed in no titles. So here Ms. Nora shows up in front of the classroom, and it takes a while before they figure out Ms. Norris has a PhD in engineering as well. So if the chair of the search committee could go to that first lecture with them and say, we held a national search, 200 applicants applied for this position, we interviewed 6. We chose Professor Norris because of these reasons. Automatically, the students have a respect for the professor and their teacher in a way that would not happen normally. It would take probably a good month for the students to develop the type of respect that they will immediately get with that jump start. So I think there's a lot of actions like that that our male colleagues can take to help us in establishing our credentials in the community.
Any thoughts?
So I'm going to speak. Is my mic on? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the intersectionality that is life in the United States, that I also think is life in many of the MENA countries as well. We are dealing not only with gender, we are also dealing with race, we are also dealing with class, we are also dealing with religious preferences or religion. So when we're dealing with all of these things, again, I want to go back to really understanding the difference. Having led 2 STEM grants, when I left my first institution, I left it because after 20 years, I had brought in $54 million in funding. I'd led some Hispanic-serving STEM grants. In the United States, the dynamic is a little bit different, but racism is very much present. And so it's not only that you're advocating on the basis of gender, you're also advocating on the basis of race, and you're advocating for inclusion of those who have been excluded historically. So the legacy of all of this, it's much more than just gender. It's really making sure that folks can engage fully. Because in the United States right now, it is, when I am working with JPL or Boeing or some of the large industry partners, they are seeking our diversity because they know the more different people that they put on a team, the better the solution will be. So for me, it was always advocating that. Now, I do want to talk about authority, because when you come as a woman and you find that you have all of the power in the world, but not enough authority to create the change that needs to be made, that is the time when you need to launch. And oftentimes that means leaving the position you're in. So I found myself in my first institution with a lot of resources, and everyone believed in my capacity to write the grants and lead the process and build the change. But sometimes you have to say, okay, enough. I will move to the next opportunity and the next opportunity. And that is really essential, because you're also, as you talked about when you took the leave time to raise your children, you're also modeling what will be tolerated and what will no longer be tolerated. And I think it's that juxtaposition and that intersectionality of seeking not only power, and for me, power is never about my ego, it is about the change that I can affect. And I'll give you an example. Having created a center for Latino community health as a white woman who some people say I'm the wannabe, I really love the culture and I love the language and I love all of those things. I knew that that center is, if it were mine, it really didn't have a legacy, because I wasn't the reason it was created. It was created for a larger purpose. And I am so proud of it now, because it is actually run by a woman who was my student, who was an immigrant to the United States, who was the only one in her family to go to college, who is now the director of the center and just won the Early Career Award as a professor. That is legacy. Legacy can never be about you. So about me or about any of us personally, it has to be about a higher purpose. And that's what when I spoke about my father, because for me, I am my father's legacy, and I will continue to replicate his legacy through the good work that I do. So to really look for those intersections of where it's not just one thing, but maybe 2 or 3 or 4 things that is putting a very worthy person not into that change-making, decision-making agency, that is what we all need to seek to do. And much like you said, it's looking at the person and seeing the potential in others and making sure that that potential reaches its highest.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll come back to our panelists for their final thoughts. However, I was told that there is some time for questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question for our panelists, please do step up, step forward. I'll look at you until someone gets a microphone. So, is there a microphone there? I cannot see with the lights.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mariam. I am a PhD student in computer science and medical informatics. First, I would like to thank all the guests today. Your speech were very inspiring to me as a woman, as the mother of 3 kids who discontinued her career and education and gave her time to raise her children until they are in a certain age. But when I am back to my passion and to continue my higher education, there was a lot of challenges. Now I am in my 3rd year of PhD, and I am very happy that I did it and I came through this challenging journey. But for other women who are going through the same challenge, they want to come back to higher education. They were discontinued because of any reason, being it children, being it society, or any other challenges. When they are back to higher education, they face a lot of challenges. First of challenges, and the most important, is financial, because almost of scholarships are limited by age. And I would like to know your thoughts about the solution and efforts which are needed to be done in supporting such women who are having the skills, enough will, enough drive to achieve their dreams in the academia, and why not being a leader woman in science or whatsoever field they are pursuing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. Please.
I want to give you a hand first.
Yeah.
Because I think those, as I said before, for me, motherhood was the closest. When I came to work for engineers, it was the closest that I've ever seen to engineering is motherhood, keeping all of that in moving along well. So I want to congratulate you, and I also want to talk to you again about the intersectionality, because age is another intersection, right? It is another factor that often discriminates folks against folks, or allows people, or doesn't allow people to pursue. We have expectations that we've built in that are often discriminatory, right? And we always have to question our bias around, and each of us has to do that to be a better person and a better decision maker in our lives. So right now in the United States, I think it is something that we are seeing, at least at Oakland University, we are seeing that we are very much welcoming adult learners. We are seeking, because learning isn't something that happens until you're 18 or 25 or 30 or 35. Learning is a lifelong process. So we are actually now in certain regions of the United States really welcoming adult learners and learning how that we can work with students who have stopped out to come back in a number of creative ways. And I think that, and you're in computer science, is one of the spaces wherein we can really use technology to reach folks and to accommodate different types of lifestyles and make sure that people can engage fully in the different intersections and roles in their lives to pursue their dreams. And I just want to congratulate you on being such a great role model for your family and your children and society at large. And please keep going.
Further thoughts? More thoughts?
Kudos to you for sure. And recognizing the challenges, it's interesting right now, actually, in my inbox, I was just responding to some emails this morning. We're writing a grant to the National Institutes of Health for a training grant. And one of the questions that we now have to answer is, what is your family-friendly policy at the university for graduate students and for postdocs? What do you do to help them to provide childcare, to find childcare, to increase the salary in these situations, which is what I think you're talking about. But many of the students in the STEM disciplines in the US, as I said, are funded by federal funding agencies. So the federal government making the choice to allow there to be an option for supplements to cover these things is a wonderful signal that the nation is really recognizing the importance of this workforce, that we can't have the diverse solutions that are required to solve our world's most pressing challenges right now if we don't have a diversity of thought at the table. I was struck by a CIA presentation I was at once when they were talking about monitoring the internet for insurgents activity. And evidently there's this woman in somewhere in New England who always wears bunny slippers. She didn't go to college, but she monitors the internet, and evidently she's their best source of information. Talking about the diversity of thought, when you see things from a different perspective, so she's looking at the same data everyone else is looking at, but she was able to identify things of interest to the community in a way that other people weren't. So when you bring in the diversity of perspectives, you get way more creative ideas. So we need you to finish your PhD. We need many more people like you in the field. And the good news, at least to me right now, is in the US, the federal government is recognizing that takes resources, and that's what you're pointing to, is where am I going to get the resources to do this? I've got the passion, but how do I make it happen?
I think first of all, we all need to congratulate you for continuing your studies, and also you need to remember that you are not alone. We all go through this same sort of phase, and we find our way, and inshallah you will also reach to the highest position. And the other thing which I just mentioned in my talk also, that that Athena's One program is in British, but similar programs can be in other countries also, where universities are asked to provide the information of how much they have worked in making their policies inclusive. And that is not just for the gender purpose, but for other minority groups as well. So I think that definitely the funding bodies, it can be Eisesco, it can be Higher Education Commission of the country, or the government, or the university itself, that they need to make sure that they have these policies made which encourage inclusiveness of women as well as other minorities, and this has to be linked with the grant, because only when it's linked with the grant that universities make sure that those things are done. So I think that will going to help, and for example, in my university, what we did initially, we used to have certain maximum age limit for the admission. We just abolished that. There is no age limit for any program. You can, because that actually was hindering some women who wanted to come back to their studies. What we also did was that any female, like in undergrad program, if they are not able to continue their studies because they get married or for some other personal reasons, what we have done is that they can complete the rest of their credit hours online, whether through our university or through another university which is called Virtual University in Pakistan, which is, they have all their courses online. So we need to have that sort of policies which provides the flexibility to the females so that they can complete their degree program or their career. Similarly, in our university, we had a well-established daycare center, as well as even little things like breastfeeding corners and things like that. These are small steps which can be taken, but they
do affect life of those women a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do want to say something. You inspired us all by your story because it's so much similar to many stories. I think it's interesting what you highlight is the fact that so much of the work that women do is not only unpaid for, but sometimes they get penalized because of it. Like in your situation, when you get back to the university, taking care of your family, you have been, because of age, you have no access to the funding mechanisms. So taking it from a strategic level where institutions, countries and institutions have to develop a solution in a way in terms of supporting the ecosystem and maturing the ecosystem to a personal level to where you stand, I would give you 2 pieces of advice. Don't give up and look for alternative sources of funding because they are available. Alternative sources of support, these are available. Don't look within your local context. Go fish in a wider pond, and the global pond, the bigger pond, has many, many solutions. So again, being penalized for doing what is appropriately a job that should be paid for is a phenomenon that we all have been through, but I do think, and I do say that we like to add my voice to my colleagues here in congratulating you, but also I would say don't give up. I think we're about to wrap up now because we're at the end of our session. Just really 10 seconds each person, just each panelist, if you want to say final thoughts. We're going yes, please, Britt.
And I wish that I had learned this 20 years ago, but I know it now. And I think the main thing is to remain reflective. We live in very reactive times. Very, very reactive times right now. I think, as we are realizing by the second that our planet is shrinking, that the challenges that we are dealing with are incredibly large. And about two and a half years ago, I lost my home in a fire. We lost all of our material possessions. We had 20 minutes to leave our home. Water is going to be a greater challenge, a greater and greater challenge. Again, we need all of the minds and the hearts and the passion. Passion isn't unlimited. It's like love. It's completely unlimited. You can channel it at any time. And I think when I think to that moment, what helped me get my family back on track really quickly, it was 5 days before I applied for the job as provost. I had a 2-day interview. I had no clothes to wear, et cetera, et cetera. It was a very traumatic time. I really called on myself to remain not reactive, to go above being responsive, but to really become reflective at how I was going to build the narrative of what I was going through and what I was leading my family through at that time in my life. So I really ask women to, again, look for the complexity and challenge yourself when you are facing challenges, to take a deep breath. I'm sure you've all learned that breathing where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you rest for 4 seconds. Use those breathing techniques, use that responsiveness, and call on yourself to move beyond reactivity to responsiveness, and then to become reflective very quickly.
Thank you very much.
Because we need reflective leaders.
Thank you very much. Pamela.
This conference really is on leadership and higher education. I just want to emphasize that leadership comes in many places and at many levels. So one of my favorite quotes, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, or become more, you are a leader.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bushra.
I would like to say that as in today's world, things are changing very fast and there are very complex challenges, but at the same time, there are opportunities also, opportunities which were not there before. And that is what we need to explore. I mean, particularly this, 2 years ago when we had COVID, and we learned that how much can be done from home and how much can be done through distance learning and collaborating with people sitting any corner of the world is something which we need to explore. So I think that is the opportunity which we all need to explore, and that is going to offer a very bright future.
Be reflective, inspire others, and find opportunities. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you very much for your time, ladies. Thank you.
This morning was a beautiful morning, and we were really very happy for all of you being with us today. Now, I would like, there will be lunch, but after the afternoon session, I would like to invite you to visit the exhibition museum of our Prophet, Seerah, and Islamic civilization. We will take you on a tour that will take you all the way back to when our Prophet started, but more importantly, also the women, who they are, what have they done to our society, and how are they really affected the whole Islamic civilization, but the world at large. So we would love to have you after the afternoon session, and we'll take you in a special tour during that one, and I'm sure that you will be impressed. And the invitation to all the speakers, to all our guests. Shukran.